5 tactics narcissists hate the most. Machiavelli's rules of psychological power. They told you to set boundaries. They told you to communicate clearly. They told you to be honest about how they make you feel. And every time you did, it got worse, because you were not dealing with someone who responds to reason. You were dealing with someone who feeds on your reaction. And you have been feeding them for a long time. Most people think the narcissist is afraid of confrontation. They are not. They built their entire architecture around it. They designed the argument. They scripted your response. They already know how it ends. What they are not prepared for is the player who refuses to follow the script. What they cannot process is the mind that has studied the game longer than they have. Machiavelli said it in the 16th century, and it is still true today. The greatest weapon against a calculating mind is not emotion, it is strategy. This is not a video about healing. This is not a video about forgiveness or understanding or giving people the benefit of the doubt. This is a video about power. Specifically, the 5 tactics that dismantle the narcissist's psychological infrastructure from the inside. And by the time this video ends, you will not just understand why these tactics work. You will feel them shift something in you. Niccolo Machiavelli spent his life studying rulers, not the ones who were kind, not the ones who were loved, the ones who survived, the ones who held power in environments designed to destroy them. His central law was deceptively simple. Control the conditions of the interaction, and you control the outcome of the relationship. He did not believe in reacting, he believed in engineering. And what most people do not understand about narcissistic dynamics is that every single encounter is engineered. Every argument, every silent treatment, every moment of warmth, every withdrawal of warmth, it is all architecture. It is all designed to produce one thing, your reaction. Because your reaction is not just emotional expression, your reaction is data. And they are using that data to build tighter and tighter control. Machiavelli also understood something about psychological warfare that most modern psychology misses entirely. He understood that the person who is most emotionally invested in the outcome of an interaction is always the weaker position. Always. It does not matter how intelligent you are. It does not matter how right you are. The moment you need the interaction to go a certain way, you have handed your opponent leverage, and the narcissist has been exploiting that leverage since before you knew the game existed. Here is the mechanism you need to understand before the tactics begin. Narcissistic control operates on a loop. Provocation creates reaction. Reaction creates access. Access creates leverage. Leverage creates control. That loop is their oxygen. Every tactic in this video is designed to do one thing. Cut the oxygen, not with anger, not with retaliation, with something far more devastating. Precision, the kind of precision that comes not from emotion, but from understanding exactly how the system works and choosing, deliberately, not to feed it. The narcissist does not fear someone who is angry. Anger is still reaction. Anger is still access. What they fear is the person who looks at the entire game and quietly decides they are done playing it. Tactic 1. The silence that holds power. Most people think silence is passive. They are wrong. Silence, when wielded with intention, is one of the most aggressive psychological moves available to a human being. The narcissist has been trained by every previous relationship to expect a response, an explanation, a defense, a counter-argument, a tearful breakdown, or a cold shutdown. Whatever your pattern is, they have catalogued it. They know your emotional signature. They know how long it takes before you break. Silence breaks the pattern entirely. Machiavelli wrote that the prince who speaks less is feared more, not because silence is mysterious, because silence cannot be argued with, cannot be manipulated, cannot be reframed. The moment you explain yourself, you have handed them ammunition. The moment you defend yourself, you have confirmed that their accusation landed. But silence? Silence is an unbreakable wall. They cannot climb it. They cannot go around it. They can only stand in front of it and feel, perhaps for the first time, what it feels like to have no access. The real-life move is this. The next time they provoke, do not respond immediately. Not with anger, not with logic, not with anything. Hold the silence the way a chess player holds a position. Let them fill the space. And watch what happens when the person who is used to controlling the emotional temperature of every room discovers that you have stopped providing the fuel. They will escalate. They will try a different provocation. They will shift tactics. And every shift is evidence that tactic 1 is working, because a person who is in control does not need to escalate. Only the desperate escalate. The consequence is this. Silence forces them into a position they are architecturally unequipped to handle, waiting, wondering, recalculating. You have turned their most reliable weapon, which is your predictability, into a liability. Tactic 2. Emotional flatness. Here is what no one tells you about the narcissist's rage. It is not genuine anger. It is a stimulus response test. They want to see if you will match their emotional pitch. Because if you match it, they have proof. Proof that they affect you. Proof that they have access to your nervous system. Proof that the power dynamic remains intact. The moment you match their energy, you have lost. Not the argument, the game. Emotional flatness is not the same as coldness. Coldness is still an emotional state. It still communicates that they have gotten to you. What we are talking about is something deeper, a genuine, trained, strategic neutrality. The kind of neutrality that communicates not that you are suppressing something, but that there is nothing to suppress, that their behavior does not register as significant enough to disturb your internal state. This is psychologically catastrophic for the narcissist, because the entire architecture of their control is built on the assumption that they matter to you enough to affect you. Machiavelli understood this as the law of emotional leverage. He who feels more yields more. Every relationship has an emotional hierarchy. The person who cares less holds more structural power. Not because caring is weakness, but because visible, reactive caring is access, and access is leverage. Emotional flatness does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop broadcasting it where they can use it against you. The real-life move. The next time they deliver a line designed to provoke a reaction, a criticism, an accusation, a threat, a sudden withdrawal, practice a response that communicates nothing, not coldness, not anger, not even understanding. A neutral acknowledgement that gives them nothing to grab onto. Watch the confusion land. Watch them repeat themselves louder, more insistently, more desperately, because they are testing the equipment and discovering it no longer works. And that discovery, that moment of genuine confusion about why you are not responding the way you always have, is the first crack in their control. But the third tactic is the one they cannot recover from. The one that does not just disrupt the loop. The one that dismantles the entire reason they are there. Tactic 3. Withdrawing attention completely. Understand this. Narcissistic supply is not primarily about admiration. That is the surface layer. At the deepest level, narcissistic supply is attention. Any attention. Your admiration is supply. Your fear is supply. Your anger is supply. Your tears are supply. Your silence in the wrong context, the silence that communicates suffering, is supply. They do not need you to think well of them. They need you to think about them. And most people, even when they are trying to protect themselves, are still feeding the system. They are still giving the narcissist the one thing that keeps them powerful: relevance. Machiavelli's law of invisibility states that the greatest punishment a ruler can deliver is not exile or execution. It is irrelevance, to be removed from the board entirely, not fought, not argued with, not confronted, simply made irrelevant. And for the narcissist, irrelevance is not just an insult, it is an existential threat, because their entire psychological structure is built on the premise that they are the center of your emotional life, of the social dynamic, of every room they enter. Withdraw the audience and you do not just weaken them, you remove the stage they perform on. The real-life move is precise and it requires nerve. You redirect your attention, deliberately and visibly, toward your own life, your work, your growth, your relationships that do not require you to manage someone else's emotional state. You do not announce this. You do not make it a statement. You simply live it. Because the moment it becomes a statement, it becomes a reaction, and a reaction is still a supply. The move is to stop existing primarily in relation to them, to become genuinely absorbed in something they cannot access or disrupt. This is not revenge, it is reclamation, and the narcissist will feel it before you say a single word. The consequence is profound. Without your attention, they have no mirror, and without the mirror, they are left with themselves, which is the one place they cannot survive. Tactic 4. Refusing to explain or justify. Every explanation you have ever given to a narcissist has been a mistake. Not because explanations are wrong, because with this particular architecture, your explanation is not heard as information, it is heard as an opening. The moment you explain why you made a decision, you have entered a negotiation, and they are better at negotiating than you are. They have spent their entire life negotiating reality. Your reasoning becomes a target, your logic becomes a debate. Your vulnerability becomes a weapon they hand back to you at the worst possible moment. Machiavelli was devastatingly clear about this principle. The prince who must explain his actions has already lost authority over them. Explanation implies that your decisions are subject to someone else's approval. And once you operate in that frame, you have accepted a hierarchy in which they hold the right of judgment over your choices. You have submitted to their court. You have agreed to be evaluated by their standards, and their standards will always find you lacking. Because finding you lacking is how they maintain superiority. The real-life move requires a level of psychological courage that most people underestimate. It is the ability to make a decision and refuse to defend it, not rudely, not coldly, simply with the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who does not require external validation for their choices. When they demand an explanation, you offer none, not because you are hiding something, but because your decisions belong to you, and you have stopped submitting them for approval to someone who has demonstrated they will use your openness against you. The phrase is not an argument. It is a complete sentence, a quiet one, and it communicates something more than any explanation ever could. It communicates that you have left the court. The consequence. The narcissist's control mechanism depends on keeping you in a defensive posture. The moment you refuse to defend, you have stepped out of the posture entirely. They cannot control someone who does not need their approval, and they know it. Tactic 5. The disappearance. This is the one they cannot prepare for. This is the tactic that does not just disrupt the dynamic, it ends it, and it ends it in the most psychologically precise way possible, because it does not give them the satisfaction of a dramatic exit. No confrontation, no final speech, no ultimatum that allows them to script a response. The disappearance is the most radical and most Machiavellian move available to you. It is the decision to stop being a character in their story. Understand the architecture of what you have been. You have been the protagonist in a narrative they wrote and continue to rewrite. The one who loves them despite everything. The one who keeps coming back. The one who can always be pulled back into the orbit with the right combination of warmth and threat. You have been the proof of their power, and as long as you remain visible, reachable, emotionally invested in the relationship in any form, you are still serving that function, even in resistance, even in anger, even in grief. You are still in the story. The disappearance removes you from the narrative entirely, not dramatically, not with a closing monologue, with the quiet, absolute finality of someone who has simply moved on. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful political move is the one that leaves the opponent with nothing to respond to. An opponent who attacks you gives you something to fight. An opponent who debates you gives you something to counter, but an opponent who simply is no longer there. There is no strategy for that. There is no counter move, because you have not moved. You have simply left the board, and once you leave the board, the game cannot continue. They can play against your memory. They can construct a version of you in their mind that they continue to argue with and manipulate and control, but they cannot touch the real you, because the real you is no longer in the room. The real life move is the hardest and the most important. It is not just physical distance. It is psychological distance. It is the decision made in the deepest part of you to stop caring how this story ends for them, to stop hoping they will one day understand what they did, to stop waiting for the apology that was never coming, to stop monitoring them from a distance to see if they have changed. The disappearance is complete only when you are genuinely no longer narrating their story in your head, when the space they occupied in your mind is slowly, methodically reclaimed by your own life, by your own thoughts, by your own future that has nothing to do with them at all. The consequence is the most devastating of all five, because they cannot control what they cannot reach. They cannot manipulate what no longer cares. They cannot maintain superiority over someone who has stopped counting. The narcissist's entire psychological empire is built on the assumption that you will always be there, that you will always return, that your connection to them is the central gravity of your emotional life. The disappearance does not just challenge that assumption, it destroys the foundation it was built on, and without that foundation, without the audience, without the supply, without the reaction and the access and the leverage, what remains? The structure collapses, not because you destroyed it, because you simply refused to hold it up. You were never the problem, you were the supply, and the most Machiavellian thing you can do with that knowledge is use it. Not to hurt them, not to win an argument that was never really about the argument, but to engineer your own exit from a game that was designed for you to lose. Most people spend years trying to change the narcissist, trying to reach the person underneath, trying to love them back into something resembling safety. And Machiavelli would have looked at that strategy with something close to pity, not because love is weakness, but because strategy applied to the wrong objective is always wasted. The objective was never to change them. The objective was always to understand the game, neutralize their advantages, and walk away with your power intact. Silence is a weapon. Emotional flatness is armor. Withdrawing attention is a siege. Refusing to explain is a declaration of sovereignty, and the disappearance is the endgame. 5 moves, each one surgical, each one designed not to wound, but to exit, to take back the emotional real estate they have occupied in your mind, your nervous system, your narrative, and build something on it that belongs entirely to you. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But he also understood something that most people miss. The most formidable position of all is the one that requires neither. The position of the person who has stopped needing to be feared, or loved, or understood, or approved of by the person standing in front of them. Power belongs to the one who controls the conditions. But true power begins when you remove yourself from the conditions entirely and stop needing them to go your way. That is not detachment. That is mastery. If this landed where it was supposed to land, leave a comment and tell me which one hit hardest. Was it the silence or was it the disappearance? I want to know which weapon you are picking up first. And if you have been holding back from subscribing because you are still deciding whether this channel is worth your time, consider this the deciding moment. Every week this channel goes deeper into the psychology of power, the moves most people never learn because no one ever taught them. Subscribe only if you are done being someone else's supply. Thanks for watching.